everybody. Welcome to the Energy News Beat Daily Stand-Up. My name's Stuart Turley, President and CEO of the Standup Group. It is crazy out on the news desk. Let's cover the first stories here. Ukraine tried to sabotage Russian gas supply to Turkey, says Moscow. Tougher sanctions to curb Russian oil supply to China and India. Not so fast. Next story, New Delhi expects Russian oil to keep flowing despite U.S. sanctions. Sanctions on Russia killing German companies. Chancellor candidate. This is now just an amazing thing going on. The total financial and fiscal ruin of the EU is going on. PetroVietnam Power fires up LNG power plant. I want to talk about and tee up a story I've got writing right now. And also Trump to issue 6-month moratorium on offshore wind projects. I think that's pretty important, and I just heard some whales start cheering, so that's pretty cool. Let's start with Ukraine. Ukraine tried to sabotage Russian gas supply to Turkey. This is pretty amazing. The TurkStream, the site is crucial for the operation for the TurkStream pipeline, which delivers natural gas from Russia to Turkey under the Black Sea. Several nations in southern Europe, including EU member Hungary, used the Turkish route to receive supplies. Kyiv's attack aimed at stopping the supply of gas to European nations through the neutral intermediary, Russian defense minister said. This is really pretty sad. This is also putting out a very important note that Ukraine is going after other pipelines. Zelensky previously accused Fico of striking shady deals with Moscow and undermining the EU's unity in confronting Russia. The TurkStream pipeline was launched in January of 2020 and has a capacity of 31.5 billion cubic meters. Its underwater section is around 930 kilometers, while the Ruskia station serves as the point of exit on Russian soil. It's pretty important that we're taking a look at how Russian natural gas is going to be the key for whether or not the EU survives. You heard me say that correctly. Tougher U.S. sanctions to curb Russian oil to supply China and India. Chinese and Indian refiners will source more oil from the Middle East, Africa, and Americas, boosting freight prices and freight costs. One thing to remain, India has been one of the largest suppliers of refined diesel, which the EU uses a lot of diesel, back to diesel, and they were using a lot of Russian natural crude oil in order to do that. The U.S. Treasury Friday imposed sanctions on Russian oil producer Gazprom, Neft, and Gas, as well as 180 other three vessels have shipped Russian oil, targeting the revenues. Russian oil exports will hurt severely by the new sanctions, which will force Chinese independent refiners to cut refining output going forward, two new Chinese trade sources said. This is going to be pretty interesting to see how far this goes. Don't underestimate the shadow fleet of all the tankers that are out there. These 183 ships wait about 15 minutes, and you're going to see that they'll work around it. I'm in agreement with the Indian leaders that don't hold your breath. It will cause an issue, but not a very long-term issue. This story, New Delhi expects Russian oil to keep flowing despite the sanctions. The market is waiting for Russia to respond on sanctions. Russia will find ways to reach us, the unnamed official was quoted. India and the world's largest consumer, China, are now scouring the globe for supplies of crude as they brace for interruptions. The interruptions are going to be short-lived. This is a short-lived price spike imposed by Biden on his way out the door, trying to increase oil prices, and it's going to be short-lived, and all it is a thorn in President Trump's side. So if you do not like your government enough, wait 15 minutes and you'll like them even less. Sanctions on Russia is killing German companies, Chancellor candidate says out of this. The sanctions have nothing to do with morality. They have nothing to do with human rights. They have nothing to do with the love of peace. They're simply a stimulus program for the U.S. economy and a killer program for Germany and European countries, Wagenet said. She is running for chancellor, and I agree with her that sanctions, as Irina Slav has often said, and a wonderful energy writer, she says sanctions do not work as intended. And the sanctions really, the energy crisis was brought on by the left wing policies in the Germany Congress. They became dependent on Russian low cost natural gas, and they thought that they could keep getting away with it as they closed their nuclear facilities. You've got to have a baseline. Renewable energy does not work, quote unquote, renewable energy. Wind and solar does not work without baseline supporting power. And she is right. It is have nothing to do with morality. They have nothing to do with human rights. They have everything to do with the love of peace. And they're simply a stimulus program for the U.S. economy in the short run. It will be continued because if you compare cheap Russian natural gas price in a pipeline versus LNG, people don't talk about the cost disparity between Russian pipeline gas and U.S. LNG shipping in. Not even the same. Let's go to PetroVietnam Power's fires up LNG to power plant. This is exciting. The first ignition is a milestone on January 11th, according to PV Power. PV Power said the first time imported LNG is produced into a power plant in Vietnam in a new milestone for Vietnam's power industry. This is really pretty cool. It's a 1.5 gigawatt power. South Korea's Samsung and CT secured a contract from PV Power to build the plant in a consortium with Vietnamese contractor La Lima, I believe is how you pronounce that. This is an exciting way to take a look. I'm going to be going through this kind of a thing because when you take a look at the power plants in Hawaii, they use high sulfur content fuel oil. And I'm going to try to take a look at recommending to Chris Wright, the new incoming Secretary for Energy, it would make a lot of sense to have an LNG import facility costed out and convert those oil burning facilities, power plants in Hawaii, to cleaner burning U.S. LNG. This is an incredibly important for the environment because you're not going to be able to get wind or solar in Hawaii without having to really destroy the environment. So it would make more sense to wipe out their crude oil or their heavy crude heating fuel power plants and put in the LNG like this one. So Trump to issue 6-month moratorium on offshore wind projects. I got really tickled about this. I think it's wonderful. I think that he is going to really make a difference in the energy field. And it's like dropping a garbage in a garbage field. I love this story. And hats off to President Trump for putting a moratorium on it just to take a look at the facts. Facts need to come out about offshore wind. Wind and solar, if you are sustainable, if you're a wind or solar energy expert and you want to come on the podcast, please come on the podcast. Let's talk about sustainability. Can wind or solar be sustained without additional monies coming into the projects through the Inflation Reduction Act? Or if it can be, yay, let's find out. Anyway, with that, like, subscribe. I'm going to be putting out more articles for paid subscribers on theenergynewsbeat.substack.com. Go to energynewsbeat.co and take a look at. I've got a plethora of podcasts coming out. Spent a couple hours recording with George McMillan on the geopolitical issues around the world. I've got some coming around with Republicans that are firing up to run against primaries. Got lots of podcasts coming out. Thank you all to everyone for making this such a great show. Have a great day. Talk to you all soon.